Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the one and only Blue Ribbon Lounge podcast.
Yes. Often imitated, sometimes duplicated. But
when we post shows twice in a row by mistake.
Oh. I mean, by other people. Haven't you seen Are You Garbage? That's pretty much a ripoff of this podcast.
Yeah, dude, like 100%.
Yeah.
Except somehow they're doing better than us.
I know. It's location.
Yeah, right. It's their look.
Yeah.
We can't go pound for pound with them.
Yeah, we can't be Laurel and Hardy.
Yeah, the BRLP, the burp.
Blurp.
Back in your ears.
Yes.
Thanks so much for being with us. And hope you like the last episode if you listen to it.
Yeah.
Hope you like next episode if you listen to it.
Hope you like all the episodes if you listen to them.
Yeah. And if not, tell us which ones you don't like and we won't do those again.
Yeah. We'll be like, all right, I guess we're not talking about
oil spills again.
like crazy rich people.
Yeah.
Although, if you liked last episode and you want some more of that crazy rich people, there's a story in there about a cannibal cult.
Oh, I forgot about
cult,
that.
A tribe, I mean.
Cannibal cult. Cults and tribes, pretty close. This episode we got JFK.
Yes.
As if nobody's done enough about this.
Yeah, like nobody's covered it at all, ever.
And I've certainly heard a lot. I tried to hit some facts that I haven't heard yet. They have just released, and not just, but a couple of years ago they released like a second batch of CIA shit.
Like
documentation.
Yes. But a lot of it's still like, what's that called? Redacted?
Pretty redacted,
yeah.
Yes.
It's just like a big page with a bunch of black marks on it that says JFKOK.
And yeah, there was like 1 million pages or some crazy shit. Like,
oh yeah,
like a lot of pages. Like you can't read all of that.
I think they did it on purpose. Like, the Warren report was like 900 pages.
Oh my god!
Just to be like, oh no, we think it was a lone gunman. Like, well, okay, what's all the rest of the 900 pages? Like, who actually read that and was like, oh, I understand everything?
Yeah, I mean, how long would you have to take to read that? Unless you're writing a book and you have to read it to make your monies.
Yeah, and especially if it's like legalese.
Oh yeah, dude. I get the thing I have to put 3 check marks on for my work insurance. I'm like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Or when you fill out the thing for insurance, or not insurance, pay taxes at work, you're like, oh, 1 and married, 2 single, 5 and in household independent.
Yeah. It's that legalese will get you.
Yeah.
And they do that on purpose.
I know.
They make it overly complicated, and then they make our public school system fail us to meet in the middle.
Yeah. They're like, you need to know about trapezoids, but over here you're like, how do I balance a checkbook? They're like, figure it out.
Yeah, we taught you math. You'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I thought the stuff I got into was I liked that it wasn't the same, and we'll touch on it, Magic Bullet and, Grassy Knoll.
Yeah.
But there's a bunch of other stuff, and I wanted to look more into like his policies and stuff, but I really only skimmed the surface on that around these other subjects.
Right.
Because people are always like, oh, Reagan was such a good president. Oh, Reagan was such a bad president. I'm like, first of all, they're all opinions, but also why?
Reaganomics.
Yeah.
You ever heard of trickle-down economics?
It works so good right now.
Right. Have you ever been like, you want to fuck everything up?
My wife was telling me that she was listening to some podcast with, what do they call it? An economist.
Economist.
And they were saying that we're so far ahead of anything known about capitalism that they should be calling it something else.
Oh, because we're not really capitalists anymore?
Yeah, it's like people aren't necessarily creating things to sell. They're creating platforms, digital platforms, and you're renting like ones and zeros in a circuit board for your PayPal or your eBay or your Amazon stuff.
Okay.
So there's this whole other concept of, I mean, for lack of a better term, because we ain't got one, capitalism that is going on outside of, you know, John invents a widget and sells it.
Yeah. I've heard that too, because we're not like necessarily an industrial like output. What we output is services.
Yeah, like Walmart. Walmart's a non-digital idea of this concept in that they don't really sell anything. They have some store brands, but they don't make it.
Right.
They just have one big place where you can go buy things.
Yeah.
And it eliminates, and it's not just one guy. You know, back in the day, you'd go to your local grocer, and him and his wife and his kids would be working there, maybe a couple of other people. But now you got like CEOs of Walmart overseeing the whole country and beyond.
Yeah.
And it's just completely different, and it's kind of stepped past the idea of capitalism.
Yeah, because even if you look at something like Google, where it's like they're not giving you the information, they're giving you the website that has the information. Or like they also own YouTube, which they're not making their own videos. They just have a platform for people to show you their videos on, and yet they're like billionaires. Like,
yeah. It's crazy. Fuck that.
yeah.
How you been, Davey?
Pretty good. I guess I survived St. Patrick's Day. Pretty good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I accidentally wore green on St. Patrick's Day. I didn't even know, like, I thought it was St. Patrick's Day on Saturday, 'cause that's when the parade was, and all this and that.
It's pretty windy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Did you go down there at all?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
So I don't feel bad not stopping by the shop then.
Yeah, my wife was down there. She has to be there. But it's like people are just coming in to warm up.
Yeah.
You know, people crowding around her door to be out of the wind. And then it's like,
alcove.
how are people going to come shop here?
Right.
So if you're out at parades and stuff, just be courteous to the people around you.
Yeah.
You know, some people are there every day.
The little alcove that we were sat in was the exit for the community college. I'm pretty sure nobody's in college on Sunday or Saturday.
Here's hoping.
Yeah. And plus, I think it was spring break this week. So.
It was.
Yeah. But no, I made some corned beef and cabbage for
you're
my
down
kid,
on that.
And, yeah.
Oh, you made it this year. You used to go to other places
Like
to
try
get
to find
usually,
it.
right?
This year, I'm like, nah, I'm making it myself.
How did it turn out?
Good. Great.
Excellent.
Yeah, he's 8 hours. Just
Slow cooker
with a pale ale.
Oh, okay.
I used a stout, so it was a little off. Next year, I'll probably do it like a pale ale.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, or like some kind of beef stock.
Yeah.
Just water.
Just water.
Well, corned beef itself, like as it cooks, it gets tender, but yet somehow it like makes more water, like it sweats or something. Like the moisture comes out of it, but yet it's still like tender, and like you want it to fall apart when you hit it with a fork.
Huh. Yeah, I've never been a huge fan of corned beef and cabbage.
Oh, do you like salami?
Yeah.
It's pretty much the same cut of beef.
Really? But it's seasoned different, right?
Not really.
Is it unseasoned?
I seasoned it myself.
Oh.
Just a little mustard and some...
Well, maybe you could have invited me over, you know. Brought me a doggy
sure,
bag, go down
do
to the Blue Ribbon Lounge.
Oh, shit.
No, but maybe next year I'll have to commit to... Is corned beef on a Reuben?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll have to try one of those or something.
There
But that's
you
also
go.
got sauerkraut.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Oh, God.
Thousand
Dave.
Island dressing.
I'm trying to get more out of my comfort zone. I should try that.
Oh, okay.
Try something
Try
else.
new things, yeah.
Because here on the Blue Ribbon Lounge, we believe in trying new things. Like hashtag liking, subscribe.
The Blue Ribbon Lounge podcast.
Hashtag BRLP.
BRLP.
No, but seriously, we don't care about that stuff.
No.
But you should go check out the Blue Ribbon Lounge Facebook page. That at least is where we like to throw some funnies up, or a little bit more information on the episodes,
or like pictures to help more like visibly represent what we're talking about.
Yes,
sure.
Or
representation.
If we talk about quick videos or something, we'll try to post them up there.
Yeah.
And it's a great place to drop anything that you'd want us to cover. If there's anything you want us to add to our list.
And if you scroll on there, you can find the whole movie of Galaxina.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just with a little censoring is all.
It's not too bad.
You could pretty much see everything.
Yeah. Not that there's anything there. It's not like
Yeah.
one of
You'll
crazy
be so
movies.
distracted by the amazing production value and the content of the writing
Yeah.
that
Special effects were pretty good though.
they weren't bad.
Yeah.
I liked the part where they had that crazy thermal film.
Oh yeah.
That was interesting.
They swapped it.
But yeah, John F. Kennedy, unless there was...
No, we can just get right into it.
Yeah.
It's a bigger one.
Yeah, and a pretty boring weekend. I guess we recorded late, so not as much time between.
Yeah, only like a couple days.
Yeah. John F. Kennedy, born May 29th, 1917, 35th president of our United States.
Yes, and I heard he was like the youngest.
Yes, I heard that too.
But then when I was looking it up, like Wikipedia was like, well, he was 47, and I think some of the older presidents, like 42, like Roosevelt, like Theodore, was like 42. So I'm like, I'm not sure on these ages. And
Yeah.
I really didn't go farther than that, but I'm like, so he wasn't the youngest president?
And really, that's not the most important thing about his presidency, I suppose.
No. His presidency, he made it almost 4 years.
He made it almost 4 years. Ooh.
And well, the first thing to happen was it was actually a plan that the CIA came up with Eisenhower, because there was the whole like McCarthyism and the Red Scare and better dead than red. Like nobody wanted to be communists.
Anti-communist.
Yeah, because it was like
propaganda.
the height of the Cold War. Like we recently like dropped a bomb.
Yeah.
Like so they're like, oh, nuclear weapons.
A whole new, chapter in in world civilization.
Yeah, and then once you find out, because it's like I said, it's a big topic, but like after World War II, Russia was like, hey, this is all our land now. And it's like, wait, you can't, you got to give it back. And they're like, nope, this is all ours. And so then it was like kind of a standoff. They're like,
and that was the Soviet Union at the time, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
the USSR.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so then they were like, oh yeah, and so there's like a little bit of pushback, and then they're like, hey, we've got the bomb too, and then it's like, oh shit. So then that was the Cold War, because nobody wanted to openly fight because we could destroy the world. If you lob a bomb at us, we're gonna have to lob a bomb at you. Lob a bomb. Yeah. And so it was that mutual destruction, and so it was high tension, and then Cuba gets overthrown by Fidel Castro, and he turns the country communist. And this is back also when we started the war in Vietnam, because we're afraid that the South Pacific, if one country goes communist, then it's going to be a domino effect. And so if they go communist, their neighbors go communist, and then before we know it, we're overran by these pinko commie scums. So it was like huge tension. And Eisenhower, before he left, got with the CIA and came up with a plan called the Bay of Pigs.
Correct.
Where after the revolution in Cuba, there was a lot of expats, or like
Exiled Cubans.
Yeah, that the CIA secretly trained to go back to Cuba and try to revolt, like take it back over.
Yep, invade.
Yeah, because they had this idea that the Cubans didn't really want Castro there. So if we get a big enough force of these expats coming back, the civilians are just going to join their side.
Yeah.
And it turns out,
And it wasn't just the trained exiled Cubans. There was also supposedly paratroopers.
yeah,
And were those Cubans as well?
I think so, because the whole idea was to
Not have American boots?
yeah,
Okay.
or make it look like we were involved in
Yeah.
any way.
And then they also had like air raids of it sounded like that they were American planes painted to look like Cuban World War planes.
Yeah, something like that. Which is, see, that's where it gets a little fuzzy, because Kennedy ran on the platform that, we got to stop these
Commie
communists.
bastards.
Yeah. And so he was kind of hard-nosed on it. But then when it came to this Bay of Pigs, he's like, we don't want American fingerprints on it, because if it gets back to Russia that we overthrew this little communist country, they might want to get into a war, and we both have the bombs, and we can both blow up the world, like. And so,
and now was this? Do you know if this was before or after that big nuclear ship situation?
No, that's before. This is when Kennedy first got into office.
Okay.
And this was a thing because these Cubans, these exiled Cubans, go there, and like I said, they thought that the civilians would be on their side. Turns out they weren't, and they were just pretty much annihilated or captured right away. And the CIA is like, "Hey, send air support, send air support." And Kennedy's like, "No, I said we're not going to be part of this." Like, I wanted to be like hard nosed and be like, "Yeah, do your thing, fight communism," but I also said we're not going to be a part of this because we don't want to have an open war with Russia.
Yeah, and a lot of this was under the authority of Allen Dulles, who was the what do you call that? The head of the CIA.
Yes.
And he was. It was kind of supposed to be like his big brainchild, and he was the one bringing it to Kennedy to be like, "Hey, you need to keep supporting this, or else it's going to fail."
Yeah. And well, it failed.
Yeah,
he's like, "I'm not sending air support out there." So then, when it failed, Kennedy had to be the one to go in front of public, like, because he's the president, and be like, "This was a failure, and I apologize for our actions in Cuba," or whatever. Meanwhile, it was the CIA's idea, and that's when he's like, "Okay, well, Dulles, you're gone." Like, he fired him.
Yep,
got him out of there, and then like after that, he was kind of like, "Okay, well." Leading up to this, but at that part too, he started to get uneasy with the CIA.
Yeah, with how much, and like you had said, they came up with this plan with Eisenhower.
Yeah,
and they continued with it through Kennedy's presidency.
Yeah,
and so they were acting kind of as a third party.
Yeah,
when they should be, you know, making sure that everything's kosher with everything.
Yeah, but when the CIA was made, they were doing these like covert operations, and there was a thing called plausible deniability, which means if the president doesn't know, then he can deny that he had anything to do with it. So then they're like, well, we don't have to tell the president because if he doesn't know, he can't get in trouble. So we could do whatever we want.
Well, and tell me if I'm wrong about this. At this time, they're also still currently doing MK Ultra.
Yes,
which was part of our Montauk episode.
Montauk, and then also brainwashing.
Okay,
Justin X.
Yeah. So if you need more on that, or if you want to say anything else, Dave, I don't mean to cut you off.
No, it's all right. I think it's a mind-controlled episode. You want to go check that out?
It was some pretty interesting, and like I think a lot of people know of MK Ultra and the concept of it, but some of the stuff that we were talking about in there was even weirder.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you want a little bit more information on that, check out that Brainwash episode, or also the Montauk episode. That's got bits and pieces of a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, because it's once you learn about MK Ultra and how much it touches a lot of stuff, you'll be surprised.
Yeah, well, yeah, and like dosing people with drugs.
Yeah,
and wasn't it also people within the CIA like
dosing each other?
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and so you have these people also doing, getting dosed and then making decisions and things like that.
Yeah,
it kind of like really muddies the water.
Yeah, it seems like there was a lot of rogue elements in the CIA.
Yes.
Because fast forward, CIA gets information that they're building these bases in Cuba that can fit nuclear weapons. And so they're like, oh, well, we can't have nuclear weapons. What is it, like 90 miles off our shore?
Yeah.
Something like that. They set up a blockade so Russian ships can't bring the nukes to Cuba. And so they have a standoff. And this is when the CIA was like, we got to blow them up. We got to get in there. Let's just go in there and wipe them out and take it over. Like, this is enough evidence that we can use military force. And of course, the military brass is like, yeah, we won a war. Let's go do that. Fuck yeah. I can get promoted and make money. And then you have people like, Boeing and, other businesses
trying to make money off of
that
it.
would make Halliburton or
and they're greasing palms.
And hey, do you need new airplanes and bombs and infrared systems? Come
Yeah.
on, get this war going. Blow
Yeah.
up the shit so we can build more of it. And like, but Kennedy's still like, they have the bomb. We have the, like, this isn't nuclear weapons. Like, they can, like, during this time, kids were hiding under their desks. They would have drills about if there was a nuclear attack. Like, so it was like a real threat. And like, the whole country is watching. This is back when you only had like 4 TV channels.
Yeah.
And one of them, you're watching Dan Rather, or whoever his name is, Walter Cronkite, tell you like, people are sweating, sitting on the edge of their chairs, being like, "Are we going to fight them? Are we going to go to war? Are they going to lob a bomb? Are we going to lob our bombs?" Like,
Yeah, and like you said before, this is only 20 years or whatever after World War II had ended.
Yeah.
We had dropped the bombs, so there wasn't a lot of thought about it.
Yeah.
These are all the beginning thoughts of how this would go.
yeah, how you use nuclear weapons, or
Yeah.
do you use them? And but it happened that Kennedy, during being elected and being in presidency, had started writing letters to Khrushchev, which is the Russian president at the time. And so, like, while he's in the hot seat or whatever it's called, the war room, like, he's got this back channel with Khrushchev, and he's like, wrote him a letter, and then Khrushchev wrote him back. He's like, and it pretty much said, like, I know you have to have face, because I know that I have to, but you're probably sitting with people that want to make this a bigger situation than it is. Pretty much saying, I know you got all your generals around you, and they're all like, go, 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 but maybe we can work out a deal. And what ended up happening is Kennedy agreed to pull nuclear weapons out of Turkey, that we had at bases in there, if Russia didn't put nuclear weapons in Cuba. So we agreed, and he like opened this channel, and like after that, after being like 48 hours or whatever in the hot seat, sweating, do I push the button? Do I not? Are they going to push the button on us? Yeah. He kind of was like, maybe we should have peace. We should have world peace. And he gave this speech afterwards, like this. If I remember, I'll look it up and throw it on the Facebook page. But it was this whole like speech about how peace makes sense. Wouldn't we rather have peace than war? Like,
What
why?
a novel concept.
Yeah, exactly. Like, the weird thing to do is fight. The good thing to do is not.
Yeah.
So why don't we do that? Meanwhile, the CIA is like, no, we fight.
Yeah.
We're in Vietnam. And Kennedy's like, well, actually, I'm going to take a bunch of troops out and write this plan on how we can exit Vietnam.
Which is also like you're saying, better dead than red, and at that time Vietnam was communist.
Yeah.
And pulling troops out looks like showing weakness towards communism,
Right.
when it's actually showing strength towards your own people.
Right.
We don't need to be over there fighting somebody else's war. And it's hard to say because you get a country who maybe has some fucking Adolf Hitler ass guy in power killing everybody.
Yeah.
But I think there are a lot of steps before that. And even World War II we didn't get into for a long time.
Yeah. Until Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
Until they punched us in the nose, and they're like, oh, hey, guess what?
Yeah.
But
And it wasn't even Germany,
no,
which is funny.
it was, Japan. So, yeah, he's trying to broker peace, and like the CIA is still like, you know what? And they like blew up a couple Russian naval ships, like, well, because the CIA was working with these Cuban exiles, and the Cuban exiles really wanted their country back. So then they were feeling a little betrayed by Kennedy, being like, you should have went in there. We want our country back. Castro's an asshole. And so like the CIA was funding them, and then they would go and blow up Russian ships off the coast of Cuba. And Kennedy had to be like, no, we're not doing this. We want peace. Like, we want to figure something out.
Yeah, and there was talks of Kennedy trying to defund the CIA by 20%.
Yeah.
After/during all this. And even after, the botched Bay of Pigs, Kennedy was quoted as saying that he wanted to splinter the CIA into a million pieces and scatter it into the winds.
Yeah. Yeah, because he actually had to send the Coast Guard down there to confiscate the boats from these Cuban exiles so they would stop blowing up Russian ships. He's like, okay, we just had a really close call. Why are you still poking the bear? Like, what are you guys doing? And yeah, and he was like, I actually kind of had it trying to set up a channel with Castro to also figure out some peaceful solution, maybe lessen embargoes. You work with us, give us your cigars. We'll, like we can have open trade because we had no Cuban exports coming to our country until Obama, who was like, okay, now we can kind of maybe start loosening up our grip,
Mm-hmm.
So that's Kennedy's policy. And I think that was right around the time when he's like, we're pulling out. I got these back communications going. Peace looks good. I'm defunding the CIA. And then it's all of a sudden like time to get for re-election. Let's go down to Dallas and ride in a convertible. But so then everybody knows Daley Plaza, what happened there. And
he got shot.
Yes.
Just in case you don't know.
Yeah, he was assassinated.
And you know what? I don't know the demographics on our listeners, but at one time I was pretty into this, and they've had resurgences when they leak, or not leak, but when they release files, or 50 years ago this happened or whatever. And so you get kind of hit with a burst of information, but Daley Plaza, Grassy Knoll, and like those types of things.
Yeah, the book's depository.
Yeah. Those types of specific terms, I feel like it's always a little bit good to go a little bit more in depth. So
yeah, and that's for doing research for this, I was watching the Zapruder film, and I was actually shocked at like how graphic it is. And I remember watching it before, like watching the Oliver Stone movie JFK. Like it's in that movie, and I've seen it like on TV as a kid, but they just play it, and then there's like schooltube.com is the only place I can find it uncensored because I don't have a Google account, of course. And they like slowed it down, and then to see like, because he gets shot in the neck, and then he gets shot in the head, which we can get in all this later, but then just to be like, boom, I'm like, oh, wow. And the fact this was shown on a talk show called Good Night America, hosted by Geraldo Rivera, the guy that got hit in the chair by a Nazi, like on his talk show. It was kind of crazy that the whole world saw it at the same time, like in the 70s, which was like, I don't know, 10, 20 years after, or I don't know when he got shot, actually.
Yeah.
But it was like 12 years or something after the assassination that they found this film.
And I'm sure some of our older audience versus some of our younger audience, people I feel like have been wanting presidential killings now, with how divisive the country is. But when you hear a lot of like the press interviews and stuff, they're like, women are crying and fainting in the streets, and the men standing at the hospital with tears in their eyes.
Yeah.
It was obviously really emotional, and I feel like since then, and then you had 9/11, and things have just kept getting more and more separated and more detached, that I wonder if something like that would still have a similar reaction. And arguably maybe the people that were there to see him, other than Oswald, were invested in him as a president, people being there.
The JFK assassination was also a turning point in the country because during his presidency, they did a poll and 70% of America was like, yeah, we trust our government. Of course, they got us out of World War II. They know what they're doing. 2 years after that, 35%. Trusted their government.
Well, and I was listening about these released documents that there wasn't a lot of information on there about the any of the conspiracy stuff. There wasn't the name of a second gunman or anything like that. But now redacted stuff, whatever. But there wasn't a bunch of evidence to say that the government didn't think it happened the way it did, but there was a lot of information on there about, wiretapping.
Yeah.
And that in the 70s, I was hearing that they were reading people's mail.
Yeah.
And things like that. And so the things that they didn't want released from what I'm hearing were how the CIA was able to keep eyes on everything.
Yeah. Well, Lyndon Johnson, Kennedy's
Vice president.
Yeah.
And then predecessor.
Yeah. There's actually a released phone call with him and J. Edgar Hoover, and Johnson was like, how should we kind of go about this? And Hoover's like, no independent research, get on top of it, it's Oswald, he did it, just make sure that don't let this go to trial, don't let, because he's pretty much was like, it's gonna be a shit show if you have like all the news organizations coming up and asking all these questions. Just shut it down and be like, no, it was Oswald, we know it is, yay team. But so to go back a little bit, like, do you know the history of Lee Harvey Oswald?
Just a very little bit about he spent some time in Russia.
Yeah.
And then he was in communication with, I believe, people from Cuba.
Kind of. So
you obviously know more.
I know. Yeah. I don't even have notes for this.
I'm like, Dave didn't bring his serial killer notebook, so his death notebook.
Yeah. But Lee Harvey Oswald, single mom, they bounced around a lot, and he moved to New York, and he was truant so much at school that they put him in like a boys' home. And in this boys' home, he had a psychiatrist who they speculate had links with CIA psychologists, like people who later worked on the MK Ultra program. And the psychiatrist was like, hey, I want to work with him. I want to study him because he's a unique mind or something like that. Then after working with this psychiatrist, he joins the Marines, ends up on an island off of Japan where we fly spy planes out of. He becomes like a radar engineer or whatever. And so a lot of like covert and CIA and like there's like a branch of, well, it's like part of the army, but they do like some of the covert stuff for the CIA. Like where the jurisdiction overlaps there. And he actually, this one guy, I don't know the names, but he's like talked about it or wrote books about it, where he met Oswald when he was like a private, but he was hanging out in like an officers club. And he's like, this place is kind of pricey for someone on your salary. But he didn't really think anything of it. But then he started working with them to like recruit Russian officers to kind of defect, like people, the intelligent officers that they could get information from. And then after that, Oswald goes to North Carolina, Nag's Head, and is in a program where they start teaching them Russian and different kind of espionage things that you need to know. Because there was a guy in there that was like, oh, yeah, I met Oswald when we were in North Carolina going through this like covert like training, like it doesn't really say because obviously it's like CIA, Army secret stuff. But the guy was like, he felt like they were training Oswald for a specific thing. They were like accelerating him through these classes. After he gets out of the Marines, he goes to Russia into the embassy and throws down his passport, and he's like, I want to be a Russian. I have secrets. I used to work on spy planes. I want to be a Russian.
And didn't he denounce the U.S.?
Yeah, he's like, I denounce my citizenship. I want to become a Russian citizen. And so then not the KGB, but like, because the KGB is like the FBI, and then they're like CIA is something else. But the Russian intelligence officers are like, this guy's acting a little weird. Like, you don't just come in and be like, hey, I've got secrets, come recruit me. So they're like, we're not going to give you a visa. But then he ends up like they say like faking a suicide attempt, like, and so then Russia is like,
I think it's the Foreign Intelligence Services of Russia.
yes, and so he like kind of they speculated he faking a suicide. He wasn't so distraught that they didn't want him that he was like, oh, I'll just kill myself. Better red than dead or whatever.
The opposite.
Yeah. And so then they end up moving him to a place to work in like a radio and TV factory. But then he's also making as much money as his manager.
Okay.
And then while he's over there, he meets Maria, his wife. I think that's her name. And she just so happens to be a niece of one of these foreign intelligence officers. So they're like, okay, so Russia definitely wants to keep an eye on this guy. They hook him up with his wife, pretty much, and then just kind of keep tabs on him. And they don't really know, like, if he said anything to him or if he shared any information. But when he comes back to the United States, usually a person like this would be, like, detained, or, you know, they would be like, hey, we need to talk to you. Did you tell them your secrets or anything? No, the State Department was just like, oh, you want to come back? Sure, here, have a loan. We'll even help you. Oh, and your wife wants to come too? Hey, we'll just waive the fee. She can get a green card just easy. It's okay. Just come on in. Yeah, and he ends up moving to, like, Fort Worth and meeting this oil tycoon. Well, he was like an oil scout. Like, he would scout regions for oil.
Okay.
And he would just so happen to get contracts from the CIA to go to like Venezuela or like places in South America to like scout for oil. And he just happened to become friends with Lee Harvey Oswald, and then introduce him to this lady, like Miss Payne. I don't know her full name, but and she just so happened to be like a daughter of. She had CIA ties also, and she's the one that got him the job at the book depository.
Oh God.
Yeah.
So he worked there?
Yeah.
Ruth Payne,
yeah. So he worked there, and then while he was doing this, the CIA got back in contact with him because, you know, he's been through all this training. They got their eye on him. And there were two groups at the time that sound very similar, but there was pro-Cuban and then there was anti-Cuba groups.
Okay.
And so he started the pro, like a branch of the pro-Cuban group in New Orleans. And
Oswald did?
Yeah.
Okay.
And in the whole group, like if you want to look down their roster, there was only Lee Harvey Oswald. So it was he started a whole like, this is the branch of the Cuban socialist community or whatever it was. But it was just him. And then they give him flyers to go to like this anti-Cuban part of New Orleans. And so he's standing on a street corner.
Fair play for Cuba.
Yeah, fair play for Cuba. Because the other one is maybe the Cuban Socialist Conservatory or something. I think there was like something. But so he's handing out these pamphlets. And then, of course, the anti-Cuban people come and start harassing him and threw his pamphlets in the air and were like roughing him up. And right away, 2 cops are on him.
Damn.
And there's also pictures of him passing these out. And in the back of one of the pictures is a noted CIA agent. And it's like, who's taking these pictures? Who put him on the street corner? He's the only member of this Cuban group. Yeah. And so then he gets arrested. And then, of course, like a radio station reports on it. It's a big thing. Just so now there's like a paper trail that he's pro-Cuban.
Okay.
Yeah. And then shortly after that, I think like a month after that, is JFK's assassination. And okay, let's get in the weeds.
We haven't yet?
No. So the day that JFK's shot, which is like November 22nd, I think something like that. It's either the 12th or the 22nd. Oswald gets a ride to work from his friend, and he has a package, and his friend's like, "What's that?" He's like, "Curtain rods. You remember I talked to you yesterday about bringing curtain rods to work?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, okay, yeah."
Curtain rods.
Yeah, like in a brown package. Yeah. And
a long brown package.
Yeah. And so the guy thinks nothing of it until, you know, the president gets assassinated. And then he's like, okay, because he was interviewed, and I think to like clear himself because he's the one that gave him a ride to work that day. He's like, well, he got in a hold of his friend who happened to have the same type of rifle that they said Oswald used. And so him and his friend measured it, and then they broke it down and measured it. He's like, the package that I saw Oswald with was not big enough to hold a rifle. Like, so the rifle was never in my car, officer. Like, I don't know what you're, no, nothing to do with this, kind of thing. And then also Oswald, like, I'm just going to fudge the numbers, but if you can look it up, like the president was killed at like 11:25 and Oswald went to lunch at like 11:20. And it's like, okay, so in 5 minutes he's gonna shoot the president, but he's like goes to lunch. He's not like sitting up at the window waiting. And then he like gets a soda, and like coworkers see him.
Okay.
And they're like, oh yeah, no, at like 11:25, 26-ish, I saw him in the cafeteria. I'm like, okay. And then it's like within like 4 minutes, because like 2 minutes later the president gets shot. And then like there's a police officer that's following the motorcade, shots fire. He sees pigeons fly from this building, the book depository, and he's like, and ran in there, and he was in there in like seconds after the president getting shot.
Really?
Runs into the manager. He's like, we need to go up here because shots were fired from the 6th floor. So they're running up the stairs. They run into Oswald still in the cafeteria. And at like 3 minutes later, from when the one person saw him to when the manager and the cop saw him in the cafeteria, they run upstairs, find the weapon, blah, blah, and then Oswald leaves. But there's no fingerprints on the gun. So in 3 minutes, Oswald ran from the 2nd floor to the 6th floor, popped off 3 shots at the president, wiped the gun down, hit it, ran back downstairs, and looked cool and calm. Because the manager was like, he didn't look sweaty. He didn't look like he just sprinted downstairs and just sat down real quick. And then he leaves because he knows something big's happening, because he knew, they feel like he knew something was going to happen that day, because obviously, like, why would you take curtain rods into work? Why would you look like suspicious? Yeah. So then he's like, tries to get on a bus, but the bus can't go anywhere because of all the traffic. So he gets a taxi and goes like a block away from the boarding house he was at. Yeah. Goes to the boarding house, grabs his jacket and supposedly a revolver.
I had heard, he drove he had him drop him off past his boarding house.
Yeah, so they didn't
walked back
where he was getting dropped off, or where he was going.
And then, he grabbed his jacket and a revolver.
Yeah, and then there was Officer Tudley.
Yep.
Tudley?
Tippett.
Okay. But the eyewitnesses, so Oswald runs into Tippett, and
they have like a conversation at the police car with Tippett still in the car and Oswald out.
But like the eyewitnesses can't really agree. Some say that Oswald walked up to the car. Some say Tippett yelled for him to get over here. Some said Tippett had like 2 or 3 people stopped, not just Oswald. And so like they really couldn't get one specific thing. But then Tippett gets shot 5 times in the chest.
Yep.
And then Oswald goes from there and goes to the Texas movie house, draft house.
No, he goes to
the Alamo Theater.
No, he goes to some sort of, from what I had heard, he goes to some sort of like clothing store, shoe store.
Oh yeah, because like while some cops were driving by.
Yes. And then he leaves. He was looking really suspicious.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much had gotten out at this point to the general public.
Well, they said that the cop, I just forgot his name again. Tippett was sent to that intersection to look for a man that looked like Oswald, because the only eyewitness was one lady that said, "Oh, I saw him up there. He looks like Oswald." And then she was never interviewed again.
Huh.
And how you're standing across the street, you're looking up to the 6th floor, and you can be like, "Oh yeah, short hair, parted to the left, skinny looking, kind of gangly, like
brown shoes."
Yeah, like how do you see all that? Which is suspicious. But then because he leaves there, and the owner
kills the cop. That sounds
cop.
like it's agreed.
Yeah.
By witnesses.
Well, the cop got killed, yeah, but who actually shot him is up in the air.
Oh, okay.
Because some say they saw him with Oswald, some say they saw him with multiple people, and some say he had 2 people. No, he had 3. No, it was just Oswald. Like
Yeah.
the people
And
he
then
was talking to.
and then so he walks down the street, hears sirens, and ducks into the shoe store. He's acting all weird,
yeah,
potentially because he just killed a cop,
yeah,
potentially because he knows the CIA is after him.
yeah,
And then the shoe store manager eyeballs him, knows he's acting suspicious,
yeah,
follows him for some reason
Yeah.
to the movie theater.
yeah,
He sneaks into the movie theater, ends up watching a little bit of War is Hell, a 1961 feature film directed by Burt Topper,
yeah.
starring Binus Barron and Michael Bell.
Okay.
Sounds like a classic.
Yeah,
And the shoe store manager tells the ticket sales guy that this guy just snuck into your movie.
He didn't pay for the movie.
Yeah, which is like for a store owner to leave and follow a guy that looks suspicious and then rat him out to another guy.
Yeah,
Sounds pretty weird. And then so they call the cops. The cops
Yeah.
show up. And they also sent like a bunch of people, a bunch of cops.
because at this time they are looking for Oswald.
And so potentially the public knows.
Yeah.
So they could have been like, hey, this guy that looks like Oswald.
Yeah, well, maybe it's. Yeah, I mean, if they're listening to the radio or they're in a movie theater and it's only been an hour since the president's been shot, so maybe they haven't heard the word yet, like that all this is going on in Dallas.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but
it was strange that so many cops. I want to say it was like 12 cops.
Yeah, and
Fact check me.
Detectives and stuff, not
Yeah.
just uniformed officers.
Yeah.
And then the eyewitnesses at the time said that he went and sat down. Like there's maybe a handful of people in there, and he went and sat down by this 19-year-old boy. And then he got up and went over and sat next to this pregnant lady. And then he got up and went to get popcorn. And the guy at the concession stand was like, yeah, about like 116. He bought some popcorn, or like 115. And it just so happens that the cop that got shot at 1:15. So either the guy who sold him the popcorn was way off on what time it was.
And they ask people those questions. I could never tell you nothing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, maybe if I'm at work because I'm like waiting to get off work, so you're gonna know what time it is.
Yeah, that's true. Or it was a different time. You didn't have cell phones, so maybe time was a little bit more relative to people.
Yeah. So then, like, he goes back in and then just sits in the back, and you can kind of speculate that maybe this movie theater was where you would meet like a contact. That's why he would like sit next to this person and sat next to that person, and then
He
sat
just
over
like
here.
the foxes in the hen house to everybody.
Yeah, and then when nobody recognized him or said anything, he went and sat by himself. And then that's when all the cops burst in, and he had pulled his gun, but he didn't shoot anybody. He didn't shoot it.
I heard he took a shot but didn't shoot anybody. But if it's a revolver, the most amount of bullets you're going to have in it is 6.
Yeah.
You'd have 1 shot left potentially if you put 5 into that cop.
Right.
And I heard he fought the police, and his mugshot is pretty beat up.
Yeah.
Although the police have never taken violence too far, I will say.
Well, there's like a 6-minute video on YouTube about, because when he went to the police station, they weren't really prepared for stuff like this. This is the first time it's like a big, high-profile criminal case.
Yeah, and Dallas is big, but it's no New York.
Yeah, but the whole police department was flooded with reporters and TV cameras everywhere. Like, you can watch the footage. They're just walking through a hallway, and there's just reporters, like, yelling him questions and shouting, and he's just like, they're like, did you kill the president? He's like, no. And they're like, did you know the president was killed? He's like, I know, I just found out. They just told me. Like, and he's like, can I get a lawyer? They haven't given me a lawyer yet. Can I get a lawyer? And someone was like, asked him. He's like, yeah, a cop hit me. He hit me on the head because he had this gash. And then it's black and white and it's kind of grainy. But there's one part where there's these 2 like teenage boys in white shirts following him, and he's like, they're gonna get these guys to rough me up, and they're trying to ask me questions, they're trying to pin this on me. I'm just a patsy. Like, and then later you see him, and he's not really saying much, and one of his eyes is kind of swollen. You have to, like, because I had to watch it because it's black and white and kind of grainy. I'm like, oh yeah, 'cause his right eye is
It's a
a little droopy
70-year-old
now.
video or whatever.
Yeah, but his right eye was a little droopy. I'm like, yeah, they're probably trying to get a confession. Like,
Yeah.
you killed the president, or we think you did, or you're gonna tell us you did. But the whole time they never got him a lawyer. Like, and they didn't really know what to do. So then they had a press conference, and then the journalist got to ask him questions, and he's like, I never shot anybody. I didn't shoot a gun today. I don't know even why I'm charged. And they're like, you're charged for killing the president. He's like, they've never told me that. Like, I need a lawyer. And then the news people start yelling, and the police are like, okay, this is getting crazy. Let's pull him out of here. So, like, yeah, he was there for like a total of 48 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And then they were going to move him from, was it like
The police station.
the police county jail to state prison?
Oh, I thought it was from like the police headquarters to the county jail.
I think it's kind of like here.
Because they were going into a basement, right? They're
No, they
essentially
went
from the drunk tank to an actual jail.
Yeah, and they were through the basement, like where the parking garage is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's when...
Why would there be so many people in there?
Right, and because, yeah, that's when Jack Ruby jumped out and shot him right in the gut.
Yeah. And Jack Ruby was a local nightclub owner and shot Oswald point blank range. He was rushed to the same hospital as Kennedy went to.
Yeah, and then didn't make it. And Jack Ruby is also one of those interesting, like, he's like a...
Is he the tie to the mob?
Yeah.
Okay.
But when interviewed, he said he did it because he didn't want Jackie Kennedy to have to go through the trial, have to deal with the messy process.
Because he just cares so much about the vice president he's never met.
No,
Or
the first lady.
First lady, yeah.
Yeah. And like...
I'm going to edit that out so I don't look like a dumbass.
And then it's like, yeah, he's a nightclub owner, but they also, their eyewitnesses were like, he was there a couple of times, like during the press interview, or like with the DEA, not with Oswald. The DEA was like, oh, and Oswald was involved in this whatever Cuban group, and Ruby was like, no, actually, it was the Fair Play for Cuba group. Like, corrected him, and like, so it's like, okay, you're not a reporter.
Yeah.
You're not there. When you were arrested, you said you didn't even know the guy. You just killed him because you didn't want the first lady to go through all this. But you can correct the DEA on which Cuban group he was part of.
Yeah, on what the pamphlets for when he was passing them out in New Orleans.
Yeah. And there's also a couple of eyewitnesses said that, oh, no, we've seen Oswald at the club. And someone was like, oh, no, yeah, I think he worked for him because he dropped his car off to get fixed one time. Like Oswald dropped off Ruby's car to get fixed one time. And then, yeah, so Jack Ruby, nightclub owner, maybe was into prostitution and gun running. Or he would at least, like, he was, like, not a made man, but, like, a mob adjacent. So he would, like, warehouse the guns kind of thing. Like, hey, hold this for me. And he's like, yeah, put it in the back. It's all right, Tony. Like,
because sometimes you got to have guys outside of the mob doing stuff, so it kind of throws them off.
Yeah, but the guns that he was running were for Cuban exiles to use against Cuba. He was like giving his exiles guns. So it's like, that's a weird kind of rap right there. Where, and so I don't know. The speculation, I guess, is. Okay, so CIA doesn't like Cuba. These exiles, they want Cuba back. The mob helped Kennedy win in Chicago, but then all of a sudden this RICO stuff comes up and they start getting busted. JFK wants world peace. He doesn't want to do anything with Cuba.
Forever war.
He pretty much told the CIA to fuck off.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden all these ties are some kind of linked up, and Kennedy ends up shot in the head. Like, there's enough there to at least speculate there's a conspiracy.
Yeah.
And the fact, not even the physical evidence of when he went to the hospital, they're like, oh no, he was shot from the front. That's an entry wound on his neck. Or like the back of his head was blown off.
Well, and I had also seen that Potentially, the autopsy was like a super rush job.
Yeah.
That they just like had these two doctors. I mean, potentially doctors. I guess I don't know that for sure, but they just had people looking at him and called it on the spot and wham bam, thank you, ma'am.
The doctors from Dallas had a different idea. They was shot from the front. There's like interviews with them in the press where he's like, it was shot from the front. The neck hole is an entry wound, and if you look at the pictures, the exit for the one that got shot in the neck was like lower down on his back. So if he's sitting up in a car, how does a guy from the 6th floor shoot him from an upward angle that exits his neck? And then there's of course the one shot, the kill shot, and then supposedly the third shot, some guy that was standing by the overpass, it ricocheted and like cut his face open. So they had an eyewitness of someone getting hit by concrete from a bullet that missed the president. So they're like, okay, he shot 3 times. One of them obviously was a kill shot, and the other one went at an upward angle through his back, out his neck, hit the
guy in front of him.
The mayor, I think, of
Dallas.
Yeah, hit him in the shoulder, but then also hit his rib, and then somehow turned and smashed his wrist before going into his thigh.
Well, I had seen a thing on that where they like CGI'd everything, and what I think the biggest, because that's essentially the magic bullet. If you really,
yeah, well, can't drink some water, Matt. Jeez,
sorry, I shouldn't be so picky.
That's all right.
But if you haven't heard, the magic bullet is like one bullet with like 7 exit and entry wounds within 2 people.
Yeah.
But what I had seen is that the car is not a regular car, where the seat in front is what's known as a jump seat. Don't know why it's called that, but it's essentially like 3 inches closer. It's like a single person seat, but it's like 3 inches away from the door and a couple inches down. So he wasn't sitting in a position that you would think in your normal car.
Yeah.
Like when your kid is sitting behind you in the car, it's a completely different position than how these 2 guys were positioned.
Yeah, because it was like a limo. So like the middle seat that him and his wife were sitting on, like you said, a jump seat, like maybe something that got folded out or gets placed in there when you need extra room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also he was like kind of turned and stuff like that. But it seems like there's a lot of things that people assume within that. And I didn't go, I've gone through the magic bullet thing, and I know I used to work in a rifle manufacturer plant, and I had known and talked to a guy there who really into conspiracy theories, and he owns a lot of guns.
Yeah.
So he took a comparable rifle to, what was it? I have it written down here. Whatever gun he used. 6.5 millimeter Carcano rifle.
Yeah.
But he took a comparable rifle and was watching the Zapruder film. And does the Zapruder film have audio?
No.
Okay. Well, he was watching something with audio.
Okay.
And he was, that's what it sounded like. And maybe I'm wrong, but he was watching some sort of History Channel thing about it. And he had his rifle set up, standing next to it. He didn't run up and down the stairs in a minute and a half.
Yeah.
But from the time the first shot was fired and he went through dry with his rifle, he was like, there's no way. Plus there was a bunch of controversy about if there was a sight on it or not.
Yeah.
If there was a scope or just iron sights.
Right.
And from the 6th story, I know people can shoot. People shoot like a mile on iron sights, but they're trained to do that for a living.
Right. So, and like when I was in the Marines, the most we would do is 500 yards is the farthest away. Mm-hmm. We would go with just iron sights.
Yeah. Plus a moving target.
Yeah. And because they said he only had a couple seconds in between each shot, which means he had to do the bolt action, find the moving target, shoot all within like a second, 2-3 seconds of each other. And then have time to wipe it off and run downstairs and not be sweaty and just be chilling in the cafeteria.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but if you watch
Oswald, why are you so nervous?
yeah, why are you sweating?
I was watching Cops.
It's just it's a good sandwich. Like, but also, if you watch the video, like Kennedy gets hit in the neck and kind of swoops down, and then the mayor turns around to see what's wrong, and then you can see him get hit while he's facing the president.
Yeah.
And then he slumps over like onto his wife. Pretty much, they duck down, and then this one Jackie tries to get off, but then they just tell her to stay, so they rush him straight to the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a iconic picture of Johnson getting sworn in on Air Force One.
Yeah.
And
Next to Jackie,
wearing the same clothes that she wore with like her husband, with Kennedy's blood all over it.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and I guess when they asked, they're like, "Hey, you want to go change?" And she's like, "No, I want him to see what they did to my husband."
Oh God.
Yeah. So I don't know if she was like, "You guys killed my husband," or if she was like, "I want them, like the royal them, to see what they did, not you guys in the airport." You know,
Yeah.
Air Force One did. Yeah, and then after that, it was open and shut, and Oswald got killed right away, so there was no trial. There was no like, let's find the evidence and see what happened, until like a year later, or 1 or 2 years later, with the Warren Commission.
Yeah.
And that was head up by Chief Supreme Court Justice so-and-so Warren. That's why it was called the Warren.
Yeah, that's how they do things.
And then Carter, was it Jimmy Carter was part of it too? One of the later presidents was part of it.
I believe it.
And then this Dulles guy, all of a sudden the former head of the CIA that
Who
the
got
president fired comes back to be part of the Warren Commission somehow for some reason.
Damn.
Yeah, and they pretty much just focused on how to prove that Oswald acted alone. Like, because pretty much the Dulles guy was like, no, talk to this person, not that person. No, this is relevant, not that. Let's only focus on this and not that. And 900 pages later, they're like, nope, lone gunman. It was Oswald. And then later in the, was it the
Lyndon Johnson
Lyndon Johnson
is the president.
Yeah.
There.
But I mean, there was Carter was part of the Warren Commission. Like,
oh, it was established by Johnson. I see what you're saying. Okay.
But like, actually, there was like, I don't know, like 8 guys or something like that made up the commission that did the research.
Earl Warren was the chairperson.
Yeah.
Richard Russell Jr., John Sherman Cooper, Hale Boggs, Gerald Ford.
I knew there was a president.
Allen Dulles.
Yes.
John J. McCloy was all part of the committee.
Yeah. And they just happened to have this CIA guy.
Yeah, that's strange.
Hated the president and got fired for him to make sure that they only looked at certain evidence. And then, so then 10 years later, after the Zapruder film gets leaked, because he had it and it got sold to National Geographic, and then National Geographic later on, when they're like, oh, you can take it from 9mm and put it on a bigger film stock, and he's like, and they were wondering if they blew it up to that bigger film stock, would it hold the quality, so maybe you can zoom in on it and stuff. And so then they took it to Kodak, and this guy at Kodak who was copying it from 8mm to the like 12mm or whatever, the bigger film stock, was like, I'm gonna make a copy of this for myself.
Oh
yeah. And then he was the one that then got in contact with some comedian that I can't think of his name, but he was kind of like one of those like George Carlin, or like who's the
Pryor?
Hicks, like ones that are like, I'm gonna give you comedy, but I'm also gonna poke fun at the government, that kind of stuff. And yeah, the one guy from Kodak got in contact with him, and then the comedian got in contact with Geraldo, and then went on their show, and then they talked about the conspiracies and stuff like that, and then showed the film, and then everybody saw how he went back into the left, like he was shot in the front, not from the back. And then they pretty much gave him like a call to action, like, ask questions. Don't just take things for, you know.
Rupert Gordon, maybe. I want to know who this comedian is. But anyways,
Okay.
you keep going.
So they pretty much like put out like a challenge. Like, don't ask questions. Like, don't just blindly take the government for what they're saying, yada, yada, yada. And so this prompted the government to go back and start like this house of assassinations organization or something like that.
Yeah.
It's like the HSO.
It's like a committee within, I believe, the House of Representatives or something.
Yeah, to like look into assassinations because the CIA had kind of been going around taking out world leaders and putting in ones that to be better, like in like South America, in places in Africa, like kind of around the Middle East. But so then they looked back into the JFK assassination, and they also like had a liaison with the CIA, and this liaison happened to like have a vested interest in like what was going on in Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
So he was also kind of like tending goal for the CIA to be like, deflect, no, look over here, not over here, here's some evidence but not this evidence. And even though they didn't cooperate fully, the new committee came up with it's
House of Assassinations.
Yeah.
Or House Committee of Assassinations.
HCSOA? I don't know. You just read it.
HCA, maybe?
Yeah. But they came up with, they said it's pretty likely that there was more than one gunman, and it probably is some kind of conspiracy. Not necessarily like, because they're part of the government. They didn't come on and be like, I think the CIA did it. They're like, there were people that conspired to have this happen. Who they were, we don't really know.
Yeah, and they probably alluded to maybe like somebody in the Cuban government or something.
Yeah, but then when they run through it and they're like, oh, there was this French intelligence operative that was in Dealey Plaza. There was a couple of known mob hitmen that were in the plaza. There was a couple of guys that got flown in from Cuba that happened to be in Dealey Plaza. So they're like,
they're like putting more information out to make more leads for people to have to follow.
But I mean, that's just, if you just look, because they rounded up everybody. There's a list of who was in the plaza. So the Dallas cops did a really good job of like containing everything. And plus back then, if the traffic, like, people were just milling around anyway. They had the day off. They're watching the president go by. They saw him get shot, and they're going to be like, I'll cooperate. I'll give you my name. Yes, sir. Sign me up. You know, like, I'll do my part.
I'll do my part.
Yeah. And so, and then just to look through it and be like, well, that guy is a French intelligence guy. These two are known mob hitmen. This is a couple of Cuban exiles that were in the Bay of Pigs. Like, this is kind of shady going on here. And so basically, I mean, you can look through it. There's a jfktruth.org that puts out like facts even as they're coming out now. Because the most recent one was the magic bullet that was found on a gurney, mostly untouched, even though it went through two people and a car seat.
And was it found on the mayor's gurney, or was it on JFK's gurney? I thought it was JFK's gurney.
Yeah, it was JFK's gurney.
Yeah, and it would have hit him first, and it should have been at the most in the other guy.
Yeah. But it turns out that one of the Secret Servicemen that was riding in the car, when they got to the hospital, Jackie stood up. There was a pool of the president's blood, and the CIA guy finds the bullet in the car underneath Jackie.
Yeah.
And he puts it in his pocket because he's like, this might be evidence for later. And then when he's like going through the basement, he just like, with the president, like on a gurney, he's like, oh yeah, that bullet, and just put it on the gurney.
Yeah.
Instead of like turning it in. But he found it underneath Jackie. Like, how, and that's the magic bullet, but it's behind the first lady.
Yeah.
Like, weird shit.
Yeah. Super weird.
Yeah. I mean,
You don't have any more, Dave?
uh,
You've been rattling on off the top of your head. That's crazy.
yeah, because this is
It's like the conspiracy theory.
it is the conspiracy, and it's also the one where it's like makes me upset, I guess I would
Oh.
say, because there's the first time a president is like, hey, maybe we should have world peace. Hey, here's an olive branch, Chekhov, or it's not Gorbachev, but it's the other guy, Kerchik. And hey, Cuban guy, let's open up. Hey, he's like, peace. I want to be peaceful. We should have world peace. Because he even like limited their testing of nuclear weapons. He like really reined that in. And he's like, we need peace. And then the CIA is like, no. Like, okay, so we actually had a president who was actually saying stuff and doing the right thing, and then our government kills him. It's like, okay, so we're never going to have world peace? That's just a fucking myth? Because, the powers that be need to make that fucking money.
Yeah. Is it Nikita Khrushchev?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
If you've listened to the whole thing now, Dave's got it wrong 8 times. It's Nikita Khrushchev.
I kept saying Khrushchev or Khrushchev or whatever.
I wasn't paying attention to you, sorry.
Oh, I know, I'm ranting.
It's okay.
But it said that when Khrushchev heard news that Kennedy had been assassinated, he fell to his knees and just like wept.
Yeah.
Because he's like, okay, I guess no world peace. Like,
Yeah.
What? And they even said like when Castro heard about it, he's like, great, I bet they're gonna blame it on us. And sure as shit, the next day on the thing, Cuban sympathizer, yeah, Lee Harvey Oswald killed the president or whatever. And there was the French, what are they called over there? Prime Minister.
Okay.
Was quoted to be said, he's like, watch, they're gonna blame one guy. They're gonna where they close ranks, and there's gonna be nothing. He pretty much said exactly what happened.
Yeah.
They're gonna blame it on one guy. There's not gonna be an investigation, and the CIA and their government's just gonna become really tight-lipped.
Yeah.
And sure as shit, that's what happened.
Yeah. Damn.
Yeah. And it's just, God, when you're like, I don't know, it's just sad. Like, because the fucking CIA couldn't have their little war, they shot the president. Like, okay. But then it's necessarily, like, maybe it's just rogue parts of the CIA, not necessarily like.
Well, and that's what it sounded like with MK Ultra. Is that like, okay, do these experiments, and then these guys are off doing experiments, and then, what was it called? Where if the top guy doesn't know, he doesn't know.
Plausible deniability.
Yeah, and then you got
plausible
deniability within layers of the CIA.
Right, and meanwhile they're doing like, what was that, Operation Midnight something, where the guy's just getting call girls to dose unexpected like Johns. Like, so, yeah, they're out there, and then so they pretty much, they're like, yes, there was CIA involvement, but they feel like there was a rogue element to the CIA and these like Cuban exiles and the mob that all kind of got together to work out how to fucking bump a president off.
Yeah, and the mob is just, corporations that are illegal. Yeah. Because of what the government says, but the government's working with those kind of guys.
Yeah, they're running guns to these Cuban exiles that the CIAs are working with to overthrow Cuba. Like,
which it's like, we can't get these guns from our military because then somebody has to know.
Yeah.
So we have to figure out a workaround for this plausible deniability.
Yeah, because Iran-Contra was a Reagan thing, but that was pretty much the same thing where they were like giving weapons to the Contras, which is like a rogue group in South America. But then I don't know why it's Iran. Maybe they're getting the guns from Iran and giving them to them or something. But then the people find out and they're like, hey, why are we giving guns to guerrilla warfare in South America? And so Reagan's like, oh, my bad, we can't fund that. And then he goes to the Contras and like, we can't like give you guns directly, but if you want to send people up here and sell drugs in California, you can get money that way. We'll kind of maybe turn an eye on what's flying over our border.
Yeah. Going back to, the Dallas shooting, one thing I did find was, I don't know if you'd heard about the Umbrella Man.
Oh, yeah.
So he wasn't on the grassy knoll, was he?
I think he was. I think that's why they started saying that's when the grassy knoll became a thing.
So was it in the Zapruder film, or was it just photographs?
I think it was photographs. I don't think it was in the Zapruder film.
Okay. Well, there's this guy who's wearing like an all-black suit and I think sunglasses and a hat.
Yeah.
And he's got a black umbrella open, and it's like the middle of the day. It's sunny, no clouds in sight. Nobody else has an umbrella at all.
Yeah.
They call him the Umbrella Man. And so there's all sorts of conspiracy theories about this guy, that he had some sort of contraption in his umbrella that allowed him to shoot a bullet and kill the president. And so this reporter put out a request to be like, hey, if this umbrella guy, was there, why don't you come forward if you're not involved and explain why. And the guy was identified as Louis Stephen Witt, and he did come forward in 1978 before the House Committee of Assassinations.
Yeah.
And he stated the umbrella was a protest to Joseph P. Kennedy, JFK's father, and his appeasement policies within the ambassador of the Court of St. James in 1938 and 1939. The umbrella was a reference to Neville Chamberlain's umbrella. Now, I don't know what all those words mean because I didn't have time.
Yeah.
I found that like right before you showed up. But it was a very interesting story, I thought. And it's so specific. Unless the CIA was like just writing up movie scripts on, for everybody to say.
Right.
But that itself maybe would be an interesting thing to look up is, Joseph Kennedy's actions within this Court of St. James that I've never heard of.
Yeah, I've never heard about it.
But it's interesting that, even though that guy potentially came forward and gave whatever either completely too insane for people to believe or too insane people have to believe it type answer, that, the people that truly want this to be a conspiracy will still and I think there is a point where people are like, no, a guy in an umbrella had a contraption to kill the president versus, maybe a more logical one, like maybe and I can't come up with a more logical one off the top of my head because my next thing out of my mouth was going to be that Lee Harvey Oswald was a sleeper cell that got trained and then erased his memory. And that sounds pretty crazy too. But I think the fact that conspiracy theories, people muddy the waters up so much with things like an umbrella or things like that.
Or like there's also a picture of a puff of smoke like coming from the grassy knoll. And they're like, is that a cloud? Is that smoke from a gun? It's like, so there's all that kind of.
You start looking for answers where there could be none. And then that muddies it up to where potentially answers are.
Yeah, I mean, that's why you just kind of stick with the facts. But it's also like, well, I think there were 3 people. Let's look at the evidence that will support that, not all the evidence. Which is also why it's like, okay, they just looked at the evidence to make it Lee Harvey Oswald. They already had the idea. That was their goal as a Warren Commission, to find Oswald guilty, not to find out what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, you beautiful time travelers. Thanks for traveling through this period of time with us.
Yes.
The beautiful Davey comes in here dressed like the Unabomber. I love it.
Yeah. Well,
no notes right off the top of his headpiece. It was a beautiful piece of artwork, Dave. I love what you did today.
Oh, you're welcome.
Check out our Facebook, Blue Ribbon Lounge Podcast. Keep your mind open, everybody.
Yes.
And for God's sakes, be good to yourselves.
Yes. And remember the Alamo. What's the topic?